start the roundtable discussion, which will be hosted by my esteemed colleague Tim Sebastian. Tim, would you mind joining me whilst the girls are bringing in, and the guys are bringing in the chairs for your panel to sit on? First of all, Tim Sebastian, great colleague from the BBC, face of the BBC, the man who invented hard talk. And
apparently, yes.
Apparently,
yeah.
Well, we never know. It's always history that sort of rewrites itself.
Yeah.
Tim, you have seen many disruptive changes in journalism. What was the most essential for you personally before you start talking about the future of journalism?
Well, when I entered journalism 100 years ago, it was all about what. Now it's about why and what next, and I think that's a huge difference, because I think technology drives us forward. It drives people to expect more out of journalism. And if you look at what's happened as a research tool, you get the richness of the internet, and you're able to hold up a subject and look at it from different angles, again asking why and what next. And that's a big thing. Also, the conversation now that takes place between journalists and the public. This is very important as well. In the old days, we spoke to them. They didn't speak back. Well, they did, but we didn't listen very much. And it was, you know, little letters here and there in the newspapers. But now it's a full-scale conversation. We each know what the other is thinking. We're part of the same thing, trying to explain the world, trying to make the world more transparent. And that's brought with it, of course, as some people have already mentioned, a backlash from governments who are working on new technologies to neutralize the new technologies that are supposed to open up the world. So it's not all good, but it is very, very different.
Questions that Mr. Döpfner raised and the points that you've raised will probably be part and parcel of your panel. Take it away now, and I would like to invite all the panelists to take their seats. Have fun.
Connie, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Please. Sorry?
You have a special order.
Pretty much anywhere. Yeah. Jeff Jarvis there. Okay. Connie, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, again, a very good morning to you. Welcome. We're looking at the future of journalism and the role of international broadcasters. Nothing like discussing the big subjects before lunch. But we are going to deal with big subjects because high on the list is the safety of journalists around the world. If they're not safe, and they're not safe at the moment, what kind of future is journalism going to have? Also, repressive regimes and supposedly non-repressive regimes clamping down harder on free speech. Where will the battle lines for that be in the future? And who's going to lead those battles? Is it going to be the international broadcasters? Is it going to be the editors, the publishers, media houses? Who's going to join forces to try and bring out the best from the media? According to Freedom House, only 14% of the global population lives with what they call a free press and what others around this table might call a relatively free press. All that and journalism in the digital age. Is it going to be quicker and slicker? And what about quality? Something that Matthias Döpfner was talking about a moment ago. Just a few of the topics we're going to get to over the next 90 minutes. Matthias Döpfner is chairman and CEO of Axel Springer. You've heard from him. Jeff Jarvis, author, blogger, and professor of journalism at the City University of New York. Peter Limburg is director general of Deutsche Welle. Salah Negem is director of news at the Al Jazeera channel based in Qatar. And Jawhar Sircar is CEO of Prasar Bharati, which is India's public service broadcasting. Let me just tell you how this is going to go. We're going to talk amongst the panel. First of all, we're going to hear from Chiponda Chimbello, who is going to keep us up to date with the Twitter feed, what you are saying to us, what kind of questions you're asking. And then we'll hear from the audience. There are various question points, I think, out there where you can go to put your questions. We also can get microphones to you. There are roving microphones in the audience as well, so please do take advantage of them. Actually, before we just get started, 6 men sitting on a panel. Don't tell me this is the future of journalism. Really. Please, Peter Limbo. It can't be.
No, it can't be. Next year we will replace you by a young lady. This is for sure. And
Gerne, as they say in German.
I have to admit that Mrs. Merkel hadn't time this today. So, but you're right. We have to work on this. But we are quite good at it in Deutsche Welle. We have a program directress, Gerda Moyer. She is the one who is responsible for the whole program. Next time she might be sitting here.
Oh,
6 men in ties.
yeah, that's even worse, isn't it? Okay, all right. Safety of journalists, I want to bring up first of all, because this is a huge issue now, not just in war zones, but in countries which are clamping down more and more on free speech. Salah Negm, you at Al Jazeera have felt the hard hand of the authorities in various countries. Why are we not doing enough? Why is the public not engaged enough to worry about the safety of journalists?
Are you talking about the public inside the countries?
I'm talking about inside the countries and out as well.
Okay, let me talk about the public inside the country. We cover news from. In the past 20 years, the governments realized the power of independent media. They were reporting all sides of stories, making an impact on the audience within restrictive media inside each country, and actually changing attitudes and behavior and public opinion. The governments realized that, so they set up what seems to be independent media inside their countries. And there was one factor to overcome, which is the factor of trust. If you are international broadcaster, really objective, cover all sides of stories, you gain trust of the people inside this country. So they tackled this factor in times of crises like now. And they started attacking the factor of trust that people put in independent media. Attacking people, attacking organizations, discrediting them, accusing them of spying, of bias, of
Trolling was bad. You were trolled with by all sorts of people. So allurement is another way of silencing speech. Allurement by big corporates who started buying up the press all over the world is another allurement. So let's not reduce it to a binary of physical threat from a determinable state and a particular journalist.
But you have more than a third of news channels in India owned by politicians or political
That's
affiliates.
the point I was making. So the politicians of different shades, including the opposition owning these presses, is another point that I was getting to. Apart from corporate oligopolies and big businesses taking over surreptitiously and otherwise, now they're calling the shots. So the dissidence, incidentally, is big business. Let's not underrate that fact. Dissidence makes good business. So we have a very complex world that we're dealing with. We have a free space of the internet that is being trolled. B, we have within the internet elements that aren't exactly votaries of, let's say, the good order. We had one particular message that sent 10,000 people from one city packed into like sardines in a train back home, because they said that this community is in danger. I mean, you couldn't scream all over, but a rumor is a rumor. So we have both. But mercifully, the internet space is predominantly occupied by the proponents of open information.
Okay, all right. I want to bring Jeff Jarvis in here. To what extent do you think journalists are equipped and supported to operate in this very complex environment, difficult environment, threatening environment sometimes in which they have to operate and will have to operate in the future?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if you look at the threats to free speech, if you look at the increasing political control, if you look at those countries that are seeking to stamp out free speech and to make use of technological innovation to control new media, this is a new battleground, isn't it?
Once again, I think you're being far too limiting in talking just about this closed, small group of journalists.
We're talking about the future of journalism.
Well, the future of journalism is the people. Full stop. It's everyone. And until we learn that it is our role to serve, our role is not to become a factory that makes content. That's what Gutenberg allowed. We instead are a service. The world can share its information on its own. What happened in Tahrir Square was that people were using the tools of the internet. It was not a Twitter revolution. It was not a Facebook revolution. It was a revolution of brave people who happened to have new tools to find each other and connect and communicate. And we as journalists then need to add value to that flow of information that occurs with or without us now. We are no longer the gatekeeper. Now, thanks to the net, anyone can share with anyone if the net is allowed to be free. All bits are created equal. All ends are equal. And people can share with each other. Now, that's not complete. And that's where we as journalists have to rethink at the fundamental role, our place in society. And when people are wrong about something, we can correct it. When there's a rumor, we can debunk it. We can add facts to discussion. We can answer questions. We can go ask the questions that aren't being answered. These are all journalistic roles.
Wasn't that what we're always supposed to do?
We also thought we were thought in a position of being a gatekeeper. We thought in a position of making stories as a content and a product. No, I think we're a service. And a service is going to judge its success on whether it helps the people do what they want to do, not what we think they should do. So I think your question is very limiting. I think that what we're trying to do in journalism is to rethink our fundamental role with society. And in that case, then, we are a service organization. We help people do what they want to do. Our first skill is not to speak, but is to listen. And that's a skill that we journalists don't have terribly well.
Matthias Döpfner.
May I just try to be a little more concrete? The question sometimes starts when big news organizations, editorial teams have to make a decision whether they send a correspondent to a country where there is a war or where there is a crisis or there is something going on that is limiting freedom and society and the system. And more, the decision is better we do not send somebody. It's a huge risk. And of course, journalists risk their life if they go into these regions. And another aspect comes, it is very costly. So sending somebody for a couple of weeks into such a region, you don't know exactly what the outcome is. So I think we absolutely may not bow to these two factors. One is, I have to call it cowardice, and I think to a certain degree cowardice is human, but particularly for journalists it is something that we definitely cannot afford.
So
And
we need
second-
to go and risk our lives in these
Yes.
places.
Sorry, it may sound a bit pathetic, but I think that's what we have to do. It is very important. And of course, you should not force somebody to go into such a region. It is a very individual decision, and somebody who has a family should take lower risks than somebody who is a well-trained war reporter, for example. But the other element also is we need healthy, economically healthy ecosystems in order to afford these trips.
Peter Limburg.
I do not really agree with the description of journalism from you, Jeff, because I think it still is a profession, and you learn it, and you have skills, and you need to be educated, and you have a sort of responsibility. You're not only a service organization. I think we are.
What is our goal as journalists? What are we here to do then? We're not to serve.
Servicing and putting one user-generated content
No, I didn't say
towards
that.
the other
I
and
didn't say that
mix
at
it.
all.
I don't think this is the role. I think the role is also to be responsible informers, to be not biased, so to show both sides, and to judge when you have very different opinions, and then bring it together, and then maybe also show the pros and the cons. And I think to only let the users just make themselves and mingle around, it's very interesting, but it's not, I think, the task of journalism alone.
Instructions to the Financial Times, their new reporters. Find the news and tell it. That's it. You disagree with that?
Again,
And the first bit is the most important bit.
Pardon me while I hearken back to someone not far from here in Mainz. In 1450, Gutenberg invented the press here. It took 50 years for the book to take its own form, 100 years for this impact on society to be felt, 150 years before anyone imagined the idea of creating a newspaper, 400 years before the newspaper became something in the hands of the common person. It's too soon, far too soon, to think that we know what the hell the internet is and that we should define it in the analog of our ways in the past. We have no idea what it is yet. No idea. And so I'm glad we're getting to the points you talked about, and I would like to talk about them.
No, I want to come back to his point, because you're not referring to that. We are not, in that point, we are not discussing the role of the internet. He was asking what is the role of journalists. And the question is, which role will journalists play in the digital world? That may be another question.
And
I totally agree with your Gutenberg theory, but Gutenberg was not a journalist. Gutenberg was an infrastructure provider, and he has enhanced democracy, or perhaps even created preconditions for democracy. No question. But it is not an answer to his question or to his point about the role of journalism.
Well,
this is, I think, a very crucial discussion for us here.
And then, just as now, lieber Matthias, the competitors of Gutenberg went to government to try to stop this new technology and to try to regulate it. So we find ourselves in that same position today, don't we? Where we see an effort to say that we're trying to control the new world in the image of the old. So I'm saying we don't know what journalism is now. It is time to reinvent journalism and rethink it, and not start with the assumption that we already know what it is and what is possible. The internet opens up incredible and unlimited new possibilities in journalism, and we don't know what they are yet. So no, I'm not ready to say that the club is closed.
So you're basically saying journalists shouldn't continue to do what they've been doing up till now?
No, they should do that and
listen,
more.
Listen first of all,
Yes,
and then
listen.
think.
And do more, and find new ways to
And
do
what
what they
about
do.
finding the news and telling it? Isn't that the basic?
Find facts, but it's not just, who's to say that journalists are God-given the right to determine what news is?
Well, people look to journalists and journalists
Because we had no choice,
don't they?
We had no choice.
But they still do.
Because they own the press and the rest of the world didn't. Now the whole world owns the press.
Please. And Salak Negan.
You can say the internet is one of the sources of the news. The news have so many sources. And journalism in general is to put things in context. You might get the individual piece of video that represents one point of view that goes viral. And this is communication. It's piece of information. Journalism is to add on that. Explain it, put it in context, and show the people the priority. Analyze it, give the piece of information the more added value. So also journalism is using innovation all the time. If we stood still by the technology which was in the 50s or the means of communication which was there, we would have been extinct for a long time. But whenever you have a new piece of innovation, we use drones, we use satellite images, we use very mobile devices for collecting information, and actually when we get different sources of news, for example, social network sites, that's a very good source of news, but it will need vetting, verification, and actually confirmation for that, and people need that. So journalism is different than communication via internet, and we have to make the distinction, please.
Jawhar Sircar.
Let me ask you a question. Would you go so far to say perhaps we don't need journalism anymore?
No, quite the contrary. We need journalism more than ever, but we need to rethink what journalism is, and we have the opportunity to do so. And all I'm arguing is it is too soon to define what that is, and thus limit it, and thus regulate it, and thus close it down. Quite to the contrary, it is our job to open up journalism as much as possible, to collaborate with the public in ways that are not possible. And not just to dismiss it and call it user-generated content. No, it's the people in the democracy that we serve. We are subservient to them, as you said. And so we need to listen to them first to find out what their needs are and to find out how we add to that. No, there's more need for journalism than ever, and journalists must rethink what they can do to serve society in new ways.
Peter Limburg, are you rethinking? And then I'll come to
I'm always rethinking, but I think in this case, this sounds more than what I could accept, because for your first remarks, I thought you want to get rid of journalists, and I think we should strengthen journalism worldwide and give them more rights and not get rid of them, because when we don't need any journalists anymore, then I think it would be much more easier for people to suppress their own people, for mighty ones. And so I think the journalists, they should have more strengthening. But I agree with you that the time is gone where journalists are arrogantly looking at the world and telling other people what to do. We should listen to them, and this is what we at Deutsche Welle would like to do, more than having participation and having the channel open to let people talk what they think and what they view and what they see. So I don't think there's a very big
but there's a difference between that and news, isn't there?
Oh yes, there's news. First of all, can be brought up by everyone, but it has to be confirmed by somebody. So if you just send something into the internet and say this is true, then there is maybe nobody who can confirm it. So journalists have also played this role to be precise and to see, is this really true, what the guy in whatever
what Andy said. Grove, the former boss of Intel, called an intelligent agent. Is that what you would buy into?
Well, the agents and journalists, no, I don't think. No, journalists are journalists, and we don't.
Well, he said, how would I have learned about the atrocities of Rwanda or the former Yugoslavia? I needed an intelligent agent to keep me informed about news I couldn't anticipate. Because there is a blizzard of too much information on the internet, I need them to sort out what is and is not important.
Very well said.
And isn't there another element? It is a trustful and responsible source. So if a journalist says...
Which has to have a track record.
Yeah, it's a track record, but it's also if somebody makes a mistake, which happens, even the best journalists make mistakes, then you take responsibility. Okay. Yeah, and I think that's
Jawhar Sircar.
See, I'm the only guy here who's not a professional journalist. I look after about 7,000 of them and their fate, but it's hard enough. But taking a top view on the whole matter, we need journalists and their ethics to set the benchmark. It's a profession, after all. It has the element of picking up the nose for news, relate it, and convey. Package, convey. That would remain the three elements of picking up, validating, packaging, and conveying. These would remain. But would you consider Dr. Yusuf to be a journalist? Yes, no. My submission is that journalism is also something that is being crowdsourced over the net.
Which you saw in your recent elections.
I didn't mean to play any role, but it was thrust upon me. So one has to take a stand, and I would rate the person who got the most rousing ovation here today was not a professional journalist. So I would submit that journalism is a profession that sends certain benchmarks. But others who operate within these benchmarks or make deviations slightly to the contrary, people who can sort of do the job, sorry to hurt you, even better, like Yusuf, would stand to be termed as journalists even if they never went through journalism school. So we do need professionals in every profession. We need people who have the academic and the rigor and the professional ethics to guide the STEM, even in this sort of anarchic internet age. We need that. But please keep the profession open to, as I call it, crowdsourced journalism. Crowdsourced journalism can throw up some of the finest examples of humanity who follow this sort of three-point pattern and come out with even better products.
Can I ask a quick question? Not to pick on Dr. Youssef, but would you say that what he does and what Jon Stewart does is a journalistic function in the ecosystem of news and information?
It is. I mean, it can't always be pedantic sort of a narration of what happened in very serious overtones. If he can do it with a lot of candy or bitter candy, it makes, I mean, he gets the audience much more than any other journalist would.
Why don't we ask him? I mean, do you think of yourself as a journalist? Me? Yes. There's only one Bassem Youssef here. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to think of myself as the normal guy who sits at the back of the bus and throws pitbulls.
We'll just get a microphone to you, sorry.
Yeah, well, we know, I think we're just like the normal kid at the back of the bus throwing spitballs at everybody. So I think it's more of citizen journalism. It's kind of like, I never studied media, I never studied journalism. We were doing this intuitively. I think we're not. I mean, people think of us as so many things, and that's actually get us in trouble. So I think I agree with the fact that you really need to redefine journalism from the beginning again. But no, I just had a show, and now I don't have a show anymore.
But how would you like to see it redefined?
That's a huge discussion, and I mean
that's the one we're having.
Yes, exactly, and I don't see you agreeing. So, but I think it's the internet makes everything. I mean, I agree with the fact that you need to have professionals everywhere. I mean, or else you're gonna have internet doctors also, and that's. That will put me for my other job, like, you know, I will lose everything now. But I think it should be open. There's citizen journalism, there are blogs, there are everything. But I think the people who claim that they are the face of professional journalism everywhere, they should stick to that tradition and not be swayed or dragged into the normal everyday life of the sensation of Twitter and Facebook. They should actually attain a higher standard.
All right, Matthias Döpfner, there's a danger that they will get dragged.
Well, I'm not 100% sure whether I really want to disagree with this idea of redefining journalism. It's always good to question everything. It's always good to define and redefine. In any case, it is needed to improve. And there will be a tremendous enrichment of journalism through the digital possibilities. I have mentioned some, there are many more, but we have to be careful, and here I agree with you that we do not mix up things. The simple fact that the internet provides a technology that facilitates and speeds up communication a great deal does not mean that it changed journalism, the role of journalism. The simple fact that we have social communities that connect people does not mean that that is going to replace journalism. So we have to be very careful. If we talk about technology and distribution tools, tremendous change. If we talk about the creative side of journalism, how it looks like, the storytelling, how you can present stories by including the smartness and the knowledge of your users, by being interactive, by including all categories of media, how these whole things will look like in the future. A tremendous change. But if it comes to the substance, I mean, actually, I liked his definition of journalism to throw, how did you call it, spitballs? Yeah, I mean, in any case, journalists are, I mean, they focus attention on things that are relevant. Particularly, they focus on things that are not going well. They're asking critical questions. Questions are not very welcome. They are kind of, they play an almost disruptive role in a society. It's not about agreeing with everything. It's not about being in line with the government's policy in general. This critical role of journalism, asking the nasty, unwelcome questions, bringing things up, news up that should not come up.
But people need to be clear what they're getting. People need to be clear what they're getting. If they're getting verified news stories that have been subject to editing, that have been checked, or they're getting
exactly just a rumor
unverified.
Or something. I'm totally agree. That's why I said it needs to be a trustful and responsible source. Because if you read the news under that brand from this particular person, you know that if it's wrong, they either have to pay or they go in. I mean, they face legal consequences. I think that is really important.
Salah Nagan, you're going to keep a clear wall between what is verified, edited, trusted, and what comes in, which may be just as good, maybe just as reliable, but it isn't verified.
I think the most important factor is trust, the trust factor, and the trust is built on the track record and, let's say, public editorial guidelines, code of ethics, all the things that make a journalist a journalist. And I would like to think about journalism not as a profession, but as a mission. And some of the best journalists in the world didn't graduate from journalistic schools, and they joined the profession later on. Bassem himself is a journalist. Satire is a recognized form of journalism. If you think about how he started online, and then he turned into an institution and very quality program, that's journalism as a profession. Started as a mission, ended to be a profession. And he had a very, very strong impact there.
I think the word trust is extremely important, but we fool ourselves too much in journalism to think that we own trust. In the U.S., at least, our numbers on trust are depressing. And we own the monopoly. And I was talking to Chuck Peters from Cedar Rapids, Iowa before about trying to go out, if I may, and listen to communities out there. And the first thing that he said that happens is you get an hour or two of them telling you the things you've done wrong over the years because it's the first time you've listened. And so I would like to think that journalists can count trust as an asset, but we must earn it.
We earn the trust. We don't own the trust.
Yes.
And that's a daily thing we do. We have to earn the trust every day and every minute.
But yeah.
I want to turn to Chipanda at the moment, who's looking at the Twitter feeds. Have you got something for us that's coming in on Twitter?
Yes, I do have. I mean, there's been lots said and tweeted, more like 1,000 tweets per hour when Bassem Youssef was speaking. In terms of questions, at least related to the current discussion, we do have one question from MC Erastus, who asks, is social media or citizen journalism that much of a threat for traditional journalism? So maybe that's a question that you could answer.
Is social media that much of a threat to traditional journalism?
It's not a threat at all.
It's an adjunct, isn't it?
It's not a threat. It's a tremendous opportunity and an enrichment. It's a source of information because you get a lot of very relevant information through social media. It is a tool in order to share things that you as a journalist found out with others. And I think it is a wonderful technology, a wonderful tool that can enrich journalism.
Is it a tip-off service?
Pardon me?
Is it a tip-off service as well? Among many other things?
I'm sorry, but again, you act as if the journalism is up on some tiny pinnacle atop the mountain. What's on the other side of social media?
We all need tip-offs. We all need tip-offs.
What's on the other side of social media? The people. The people you serve, the democracy you serve. So you diminish it if you act about, oh, it's something we can learn occasionally. The witnesses who are there for news, who can now share what they witnessed to the world because everyone has a sack truck in their pocket if they have one of these. And we hope more and more and more are going to have these. And there's more witnessing of what occurs because of these. That's the power. What's happening then is not the technology. The technology is enabling speech by the people.
Let me ask you this. Is social media interpersonal communication or mass communication? Because that's a very crucial question. I think social media is interpersonal communication. You reach people within your circle and the circle beside your circle. For traditional, as we discussed, media organizations, they are mass media and they reach millions and millions of people. Okay, so and the dilemma is people are trying to make the mass media use the social media in reaching these millions of people. And that's a real dilemma there.
Mass, the notion of a mass was an invention of the media. I'm not a mass. You're not a mass. As Raymond Williams, the sociologist, says, there are no masses, only ways of seeing people as masses. It is inherently insulting to call the people of democracy a mass. We are not a mass. And finally, we get to be seen as individuals. And criticize Google as you will, but Google, and this may scare your Datenschutz German heart, but I'm happy that Google knows where I live and where I work because I get relevant data back in return. My newspaper has no idea where I live and where I work and who I am and can't give me relevance as a hand. So no, a mass is an insulting concept and an invention of media, and it is time for that to die.
No, we are talking about mass media, not about masses. I think you are you are confusing the two things. Mass media.
What is mass media? But that which tries to spike to mass.
Mass media is a media that gives a message directed to millions of people. It knows its categories, it knows its distribution, it knows where they live from research and try to adjust that via feedback. While in social media, how many people are connected in social media in one circle? Because it's circles. It's not like...
like society.
Like society, exactly. And that's why it was said that the world is a global village. So we have the two things on the internet. We have the mass media, which is a media directed to big number of people, and it's not an insult to direct media to big number of people. You can pick and choose what you...
I think it is a very interesting discussion, but the question was whether social media helps us in our daily business, as far as I understood. And I think, yes, it is an enrichment. As we here at Deutsche Welle, we have 30 languages, and so we have 30 channels coming in. And we can get more stories, more interesting stories, to the worldwide public because we have social medias, because there's people telling us what is going on in their countries. So I think, yes, the question is, it's an enrichment, and keep on and have the discussion with us at Deutsche Welle and surely with the other guys here too.
Okay, I want to move the discussion on, if I may, to talk about international broadcasters and what the role of international broadcasters is now. Somebody once described them as electronic colonialism. Those days long gone? Peter Limburg?
We have done a lot of bad things in our recent history, but colonialism is not one of the
electronic
topics. So I think we here in Germany, in Deutsche Welle, we are far away from colonialism, and that also helps us in some regions, I have to admit.
Who's watching? Who's watching?
Who's watching?
Yes,
normally, I think watching. We're not only watching; they're also using it, and they're participating. So it's not only TV; it's also the internet, it's social media, and it's radio. So and I think it is it differs in some countries where you have probably no access to free information. You would have more people listening to you and a broader people. But in free markets, it's a different way. People are maybe interested in second opinions, third opinions, and basically at the end of the day, it's always a small number of people. It's kind of the decision makers, it's kind of the people who are interested in democracy, who are maybe more interested in politics and economics than others. So I know that the world...
But they have their own channels, so you've got falling audiences and
we are always,
falling budgets. And...
We have, happily for the first time, a small increase in the budget. So, but yes, we are structurally underfinanced in what we're doing, and I think we also, the politics should be even giving us more money, and the German public, because I think we're doing quite a nice job, because in a country which is so globalized and has such an important role in foreign policy and in their economics, I think it would be a good invest in a media service like Deutsche Welle. But at the end of the day, it's always a small number of people. Some would call it elite, others would not use this word because it's always people who are always not in power. They are more interested in Deutsche Welle, and I think it is a small amount, but a very interesting and a very important amount of people.
Jawhar Sircar, representing public service broadcasting in India, what's your unique selling point? India has hundreds of channels.
See, we had a different task cut out for us. It started with All India Radio, which was a British instrument of, let's say, imperial messaging. They left behind about 17 transmitters. Right now, we have 481 channels, TV channels, and radio stations. So it's unmanageably big. I'm sorry, it's rather big.
So who needs you?
Okay, we provide what we call the central part of the discourse. Still, people want to hear news, they open up All India Radio. On the TV front, we have got a bad licking, because we went jazzy enough. But the point is, it's not a question of competing against private news channels. Our mission is and was and will always be different. India is a multi-ethnic country. In 1947 till today, if you see, we are now 1.3 billion almost in size, 24 national languages, 600 dialects, and God knows how many communities. Holding them together in one commonwealth around an idea of practicing democracy was our task. Knitting them together in some sort of a unison, not standardization. We do not believe in either standardization or homogenization. Otherwise, we got the way some of our large neighbors did.
But what do you offer? What do you offer that others don't? What's different?
We offer at every corner of India a voice of their own. I'll give a small example. By Indian standards, a state like Manipur is very small. It's just about 3 million. Every day, we have 30 languages broadcast there. 30 languages in what we call small state of 3 million. So you understand this federal cultural equilibrium, if I may use the term, the tectonic plate settlement is a massive task. So there, to that extent, we succeeded. On the TV front, we're getting a bad licking from Star, from CNN, from the whole big boys. I'm not sure whether we are wiped off because our ratings are okay, pretty okay. The problem was one of identity. Are we a state broadcaster, or are we according to the act of autonomy, arm's length? Right now, we are arm's length.
Okay, all right. Salat Negam, why do people watch Al Jazeera?
I'll give you an example of...
Do they watch Al Jazeera these days?
We reach 250 million households worldwide, and we are the highest viewed channel, international channel in Africa and Asia now, according to the last research I got.
So what do people want from you? What are they looking for from
I'll
you?
give you one example of something we have done. There was the presidential debate in Kenya, broadcasted live inside Kenya, I think 1.5 years ago. No other broadcaster will carry it live. We decided to do that. So we carried 3 Kenyan presidential debates live. The biggest viewership was where? Not in Kenya, but in Ghana and Tanzania. People, for example, in these countries find that their problems are similar. They aspire to the same transparency. They want to see their issues debated on television. And they look forward for their next presidential campaign to see such a debate, and they'll call for it.
Can their own channels start doing the same thing?
When
you give up and go home?
Well, I'll tell you, the map of viewership and audience of international broadcasting is ever changing. The map was different in the Middle East 3 years ago. It's totally changed now. In the Middle East, there was a movement for liberalizing media, more free press. It isn't anymore. So we have bigger market there. So that map is shifting. It's not fixed all the time.
Matthias?
Can I step?
Yeah.
1 minute
Briefly,
only.
please.
You asked me to define what's the role in TV. I'll give you an example. Private media, TRP-led, have an obsession to go to the sensational. It's survival. So when a heinous offense like rape takes place, it's sensationalized. Our standing dictum is we do not show the rape victim, we do not sensationalize it, but we pick up news of retribution against those who rape. And that is our mission. So we aren't that jazzy in the sense we aren't that sensational, but passing home the message through 500 channels that this guy has been sentenced to death or this guy is happening repeatedly is our difference. I just wanted to give you
Matthias Döpfner, do you ever watch an international broadcast channel?
Yes, of course.
And what do you watch it for?
You know what? I love watching international broadcast channels. I love the German public TV. I think it's one of the highest qualities of public TV or of TV in the world. And for that reason, I think with this discussion now we somehow come to the real point, or we should come to the real point. We have a lot of agreement. We agree that journalism matters, that we need more and better journalism, critical journalism, wonderful. We agree that the digital world is not destroying journalism, that it is a tremendous opportunity, social media an opportunity, wonderful. We do not totally agree that public TV needs higher budgets, but that's a different discussion. But the discussion about budgets of public TV leads us, I think, to the core of the discussion. Because public TV has a business model. And the business model of public TV is the money of the taxpayer. And it is well deserved because you are doing a great job. The digital tech monopolies also have a business model. That is monetizing the data, owning and monetizing the data of their consumers. But the remaining rest of players in the media scene have to struggle for a business model. Now people like Jeff Jarvis are saying, since 15 years these guys are only complaining instead of being creative and invent new business models. Wonderful. The business model of attention which you have proposed, but you're not absolutely consequently following it because I wanted to read your book and on Amazon I found out I had to pay 20 euros, so why don't you give it away for free? That would be a wonderful role model for the discussion.
I'll give you an autograph.
However, the attention model didn't work. Then you could say, okay, we can monetize private journalism in order not to be obliged to only sensationalize things, because that's also an interesting discussion. You could say we cross-finance it through e-commerce. Very dangerous. Journalism subsidized by e-commerce. Why would you need in the end journalism if you can make more money with e-commerce only? And how would you really keep the independence of journalism if it is somehow subsidized or monetized by commerce, by products?
Profit e-commerce?
No, we don't do e-commerce. We have no e-commerce. We just do what a traditional publishing company does. We create great content. We monetize it through the paying consumer subscription models. We monetize it through advertising clients. That is mainly in the internet performance-based models, affiliate marketing. And we monetize it through classified ad platforms, real estate, jobs, and cars. That was for decades one of the most important resources of income for publishers.
Can we bring it back to international broadcasting?
Yeah, but it is not e-commerce. We have no inventory risk. E-commerce is if you sell products where you have inventory risk. However, what I want to say is we need to discuss, if we are talking about the future of journalism, I think we also need to discuss a healthy financial ecosystem for journalism. And how can that look like? Because if that's not existing, then you will reduce the competition, and then you will reduce plurality, and I think that is not very good for societies.
Jeff Jarvis, you look at international broadcasters? I want to keep it on that subject.
Sure, but you keep... Matthias brought up all kinds of points. We've not had the opportunity to discuss them, so I'm going to, whether you like it or not.
And I'd like to hear from them,
but
which,
let me just
as you know,
this.
is one of the main points of journalism, is that we hear from the public.
Let me just answer your question in two quick ways. One is that I think that public broadcasters, I mean, I'm American, and I tend to believe in free market as much as my friend Matthias here. And so I think that it's odd to have a non-market entity in tax-supported broadcasting. But if it is there, I would argue that its role should become an open source source of innovation for all of media, and that companies like Springer should benefit from the risks that it can take that as a profit-making company they can't necessarily take. And I would just say that Matthias is absolutely right. And the reason I devote myself to business models for news is because we do indeed need sustainable business models for news. But they aren't necessarily yours. They aren't necessarily, there's no God-given right that says that yours must be the one that continues. I hope you do. I work with old media companies. I love old media companies. I want them to. But if there's antitrust going on here, colluding with fellow publishers to go for government regulation to fight down a new competitor in the marketplace doesn't sound like capitalism to me. I think what we have to do...
What is capitalism? Capitalism competition.
Yeah.
If there's a monopoly...
As a member of the CSC,
you are not anti-capitalistic if you criticize monopoly.
And so you're joining together with fellow publishers, your supposed competitors,
I really don't want
to
the
go
discussion to go too far down that road.
Regulation is not
a different topic. The moderator wants
It's a different topic. Okay,
but it's very exciting.
It is.
It may be very exciting. Okay, I want to hear from the audience. If you have questions, please put up your hands. I hope you have. I hope you have questions. Yes, there's a gentleman over there. Can we get a microphone to the second row? I don't think those work, actually. I think we have to get a microphone to you. Thank you.
Are we on? Yeah. So thank you for the panel discussion. I suppose I should introduce myself. I'm Matt Armstrong. I'm with the Broadcasting Board of Governors. I'm a member of the board. So what I'd like to do, if I might, is ask to focus on international broadcasting from the government perspective. So the role of the BBG, which includes Voice of America, Middle East Broadcast Networks, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Office of Cuba Broadcasting, Radio Free Asia. Our job is to provide news and journalism in areas that don't have it. If it has it, we're not supposed to be there and we pull out. Free news and information. We empower citizens journalists, we bust censorship, we break through, and we create holes in firewalls to empower the citizen journalist. We train journalists, and we try to create a free and open media locally so that we can get out of the business. So what I would ask is, could we have a discussion on those areas of the world where that is increasingly important, such as Russia, China, Vietnam, Thailand, parts of Africa, where journalists are open season and hunting, and you're all doing great jobs, but I'd love to have a conversation on where do we operate in those difficult problem areas, not the challenges of information within the democratic Western civilization, but in the other places, please.
Salah Legam, would you like to take that?
That actually operating in the United States and in the Western Hemisphere is even more important than operating in Africa and the oppressed countries, as you say, because that's by default what we do. It's more difficult to operate and report in the West about unreported and underreported people and sectors of society. The flow of information was always from west to east. Now it's becoming the other way around. There are a lot of broadcasters who would like to cover Europe from different perspectives. The kind of stereotype which happened in the past about, for example, the jihadist. Let's take an Arabic word that you generalize for terrorist group, and then it has origins in the Arabic language, which is totally different. That's reversed. And then how it's stereotyped. There are a lot of issues that could be covered in the West as well as in the third world equally. And that's what we do in Al Jazeera. We have offices around the United States, Europe, and we cover from different perspectives, objectively and accurately as well.
Peter Limbaugh.
Yes, I think it's a good thing that we have now new competitors, that we have not only from the West or the United States or from Europe bringing in news to the whole world, and they have to listen and they have to accept it. I think it's good that we have the Russians, the Chinese, and the Gulf states in the market, and they should come to us and bring their opinions. But it's a vice versa thing. So one has to accept also that we go into these regions, and this is the problem. Let me try to broadcast Deutsche Welle in Saudi Arabia. This would be a kind of difficult thing. Let me try to go in and broadcast in China, or let me go in and broadcast in Russia, everywhere with everything. This is, I think, the problem, that it's not the question that we don't want to hear new opinions. The problem is that some parts of the world don't want to hear our opinion anymore because they fear that their kind of government is going to be harmed.
Jawhar Sircar.
I think we got it a bit wrong. What he said, no, I'm saying that what he said is that it's a difficult business going into certain difficult countries. What my friend replied is that it's equally difficult penetrating the manufactured discourse of the West. Let's give you an example. I mean, let's get hands-on. Let's give an example. Look at the Iraq War. The entire discourse on the war, in the first one on Iraq or Kuwait, was completely unanimous. That's frighteningly unanimous. Vietnam had discordance towards the end. But so what he's saying is that the problem of physical vulnerability in certain Asian or Russian or whatever countries, I don't want to name them, somebody else there. What I'm saying, he said that there is a vulnerability, there is a danger factor in the physical penetration in these countries, which Peter agreed. But more than this, his submission was, and I tend to agree in part, is that there is an overriding discourse that emanates, and dissidence to that discourse is often more problematic. Okay. It's a viewpoint. It's a viewpoint. Okay. It's both. It can't be put in black and white.
Okay.
But it's a viewpoint.
The bottom line I want to say is we cover and broadcast news both in East and the West, third world and first world equally, because that's news and it's important to people.
Okay, I just want to come back to the question. Do you want to come back on this? You raised the question.
Excuse me. No, I suppose not. No, I'm sorry.
No, you don't.
The point is that, yeah, in certain areas it's very difficult. Al Jazeera does a fine job. Al Jazeera of today is not the same Al Jazeera as it was 10 years ago. Al Jazeera English is a very fine news outlet. And with comment by Bassem, the Egypt and jailing of Al Jazeera English journalists is wrong. And they need to be freed. There is another environment here, right, with Deutsche Welle and the operations of Deutsche Welle in different parts of the world. I would just like that we converse about these other areas that are challenged.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on. Gentleman over there, and then you, yeah.
Oui, Freddy Moungo pour Réveil FM International. D'après ce que j'ai entendu,
after what I've heard, I have the impression that there's some confusion between media pluralism and a plurality of opinions. So I think we should rather defend a plurality of opinions, because if you have several media, so maybe some people need to get...
No, I disagree. I think there is a direct link between the
imperialism of broadcasting and plurality.
No. There is a direct link between the quantity of sources of journalism and the pluralism of content. Of course, you can say they can all write the same bullshit and they can all be wrong. That's true. But in general, after all the experience, if you have a wide range of different sources, the likelihood that you get a plurality is much higher than in an environment where you have three big players and that's it.
Okay, gentleman over there. Can we just take one question each?
Je n'avais pas terminé ma question.
You haven't finished your question.
Voilà.
Okay.
Il faut plutôt défendre.
I think we must rather defend the plurality of opinions, because in a country where you've got several media sources, where you've got democracy and the liberty of freedom of expression, this is essential. You see that in Africa, that there's countries where there's several media, but there's still censorship, horrible censorship.
Sorry, we're not set up to take questions in French because I don't think our audience will be getting translations of it. Do you want to just, yes, if you could just briefly summarize it.
In the first part he said that he thinks we mix up the pluralism of opinion and the pluralism or quantity of media players in a country, and that is not necessarily the same. And I contradicted and I said, well, but it's related. And then he said, but there are some examples in countries, particularly in African countries, where you have a variety of media, but they're all under the same censorship, and that's why they're all writing the same in the same direction, and that's not plurality. And here, of course, I think we all fully agree that if there is censorship and if there is no real freedom of media, then of course a number of players doesn't help. It's all the same state opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gentleman there, please. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Joe. I'm a PhD student here in Germany. I'm writing on the role of the social media, or the media, especially, and civil society organization on democratization. What I would like to see as the future of journalism, as the media, I would like to see a world where the media doesn't just focus on what is happening during the war, like how many soldiers are killed or how many women are killed, but also to look at what other aspects are being created. I'm talking about social inequality, and I'm talking about the issue of the animal kingdom, where other news stories are more important there than the others.
So you're looking for wider coverage?
Yes, wider coverage, as we say. Wider coverage, and not only to look at, I know that there's the issue of business. We have to cover and sell the papers or maybe broadcast to the viewers, but also wider coverage in the sense that the ideology of animal farm concept, where we just cover the things that we want or what our funders want, is eradicated. The last point, sorry, I want to find out, because I know DW is working in different countries, like in my country, Zambia, and also BBC, I think. I want to find out what are the challenges that you are facing, because the way Deutsche Welle is regulated here is different from the way the media is regulated in other countries. Thank you very much.
Peter Limburg, you want to take that?
Well, I totally agree that we are not supposed only to report on wars and on economic crisis, but also to bring more stories from the regions we're broadcasting in, and to show also how we reflect on the reality in there. So that's what Deutsche Welle tries to do now, is to send out more people into the regions and to get more exclusive stories that you describe, not the stories that are always related on war zones and on economics, but also of common people and their problems, either social problems or every problem or solution they have. It's not only reporting about problems, it's also showing what solutions other countries and other people can show us here in the West or in Germany or in the whole world. Concerning the other question, you have to
wider coverage. Yeah.
The wider coverage. Well, you have to be more precise on the question. What exactly is the question? Could you tell us again what the question?
Well, he was saying that he wanted more about, not just about how many people died and under what circumstances they died, but more about business and
I easily agree. Matthias Döpfner said I easily agree, as far as I think I said already. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Gentleman over there. We'll have to get another microphone to you. Yeah.
Khalid Hamid Farooqi from Geo Television News and Jung newspaper in Pakistan. What we see, I am a correspondent based in Brussels, and I am among a very large number of journalists always based in Brussels. What we see, particularly European journalists are concentrated. They seems to me, when it comes to war and their troops engaged in war, they are very conformist. And Mr. Tim Sebastian, you are coming from UK. Don't you worry about, are you not worried about that one person, Rupert Murdoch, owning so many newspapers and bringing same story and lot of time manufacturing consent type of story when British troops are engaged in Afghanistan or in Iraq or Mosul? Thank you.
Well, I don't think people are particularly interested in what my views are, but I mean, I'll answer it just for the sake of it. I think there should be as wide a variety of voices as possible, wide as variety of ownership of the media as possible. Matthias Döpfner?
Totally true. And that's what I said. I mean, there is a link between the number of media owners and the pluralism. And if they're only very few, then this phenomenon that you have just described may occur. And particularly if a country is militarily involved. I mean, that's what I think distinguishes good journalism from a kind of intentional journalism. And good journalism should never be intentional. Even if it's for a good cause, journalists should stay out of all camps and ask the critical questions.
Can we hear from one?
Jawhar Sircar.
He was referring to patriotic journalism. He was referring to patriotic journalism, the sudden burst of patriotism that comes even when there are discordant voices to stand behind a nation in war. That's a very visible tendency. You see, we grew up in the years of dissidence, 69, 70, 74. So we have seen students, we have seen journalists, we have seen the academics taking on state power. And living to tell the tale. So what he's referring to perhaps is a domineering discourse that tends to stand behind Western nations mainly when they're engaged in combat to the other voice. That's all. I mean, it's just an academic point of view.
All right. We're going to hear from the Twitter feed at the moment. Chipanda Chimbalu,
Yes.
you have something from Twitter?
Yes, we do have a lot of questions coming with that hashtag DW_GMF. So we have one comment here from Tillman who says, and a question included, some countries refuse international broadcasters' programs mainly out of fear, yes, but isn't wanting to be there just a new colonialism? So this is a question definitely for the international broadcasters on this panel. And then there's another question directed directly to Jeff Jarvis, and this is a user, his name is, JR at Ujora is his handle. And he says, if social media is the new journalism, are Google, etc., the new gatekeepers?
Jeff Jarvis, briefly.
No, they're the platforms that enable anyone and everyone to speak. Take the example of what's happening here. You're the gatekeeper who decides who to speak. And by the way, we've only heard from men so far. Let's add that up here and there. That's a gatekeeper function. Whereas you're a platform, then anyone can use it to say anything they want on it unless they are stopped by a government. And that a platform is a different than a gatekeeper.
Would you then agree, very briefly, would you then agree that there should be a transparent and fair criteria for search results, or can they subjectively do it, downgrade, upgrade?
This is where we get to the question of relevance. If they were to reveal their algorithm, which is what you're asking, then they would be gamed. They would be gamed by everyone out there, which is what we find.
No, that's not my question. I'm talking about fair search. The search results, do they need then, because you're saying they are just a neutral platform, but in fact what they do today is they upgrade certain listings and they downgrade certain listings independent from the traffic figures. Would you agree that that should be according to traffic only in order to be neutral? Because that's the question.
No, it's according to relevance and what's happening.
Can
I answer the question now?
Yeah, but if they decide what is relevant, then they are more than a...
They're deciding based on the data, because what's going to happen now is we're not all going to have the same search results because we have more relevance. It's not like mass media. It's actually relevant to you or me, so that's going to be dependent upon many factors, including the authority of the site, my own behavior, my past desires, where I am right now in my context. Those are all things that go into search. So no, I don't want the exact same search results that you have.
So you're saying, again, just to repeat it, you say a monopolist that owns 90% or 99% of the search can decide how he deals with the search results independent from their traffic
What are you
figures.
proposing that should happen instead?
Of
the
course.
government should come in and tell them what to do?
No.
Well, you're the one who's running the government.
No, Jeff, don't, please.
You are.
Remain fair.
You're running
Never.
the government, asking them.
No.
Okay,
Jeff, please
I'm going to break into this in a moment because
he may not get away with not answering the question.
Okay, but I think you've got to have your own show. You two, you've got to have your own show because you've got a lot to discuss here, and it's taking us away from the core subject. Peter Limbo, colonialism.
Colonialism, I have to answer to Tillman, I think, and I have to say no, Tillman, it's not colonialism because we reach about 0.5 to 2% of the audience, and this is about every international news broadcaster does in the country. So I don't think that with this amount of figures we could really be addressed as colonialists. So Tillman, forget this.
Salah Negem, no colonialism out of Qatar, too small.
Didn't have history of, but I think the colonialism issue is long past. It's not an issue for discussion now. I can think of BBC, for example, broadcasting to Africa and Asia as part of colonialism.
And Qatar doesn't look on Al Jazeera as soft power?
Well, for international media organization, if you create a brand name for yourself, you become a brand name for the country. When you say BBC or CNN, you remember UK and US. Now, when you say Al Jazeera, you remember Qatar. And you remember it for the values that Al Jazeera represent, which is transparency, objectivity, and quality of coverage, which is a very important factor for Qatar.
Okay, we have time for one brief question. Lady there, yes. Can we just get a microphone to you, please?
I'd like you to clarify on your last point. You said in your talk that Al Jazeera has some kind of mission. And for the Egyptians in the audience and the Bahrainis in the audience, we are very aware of Al Jazeera's mission when it becomes a combatant in the conflict. And you know, this is no way to justify the treatment of Al Jazeera staff in Cairo in any way. But Bahrain is across the pond, less than 100 kilometers from Qatar. And it's been, you know, you've again re-engendered the sectarian hegemonic discourse that you say Al Jazeera is there to fight against. So if you can comment on that, I'd be very grateful.
No, I wouldn't take
briefly,
that.
Salah, because we haven't got a lot of time.
I wouldn't take that as a fact. What I would say is Al Jazeera is covering news from all sides, take all points of views, and it doesn't just broadcast the government side of the story or the opposition side of the story. If you don't like the other side of the story, that's your problem. And you'll have to live with it because you have to know the story as complete, not from one specific angle. That's what we have done in Bahrain, that's what we have done in Egypt, that's what we are doing in Syria and everywhere else. You'll find sometimes the empty chair policy because governments are trying to silence us by boycotting us. So we play the devil's advocate. If the opposition is present, then we are going to play the devil's advocate and ask the questions or put the point of view that the government was supposed to do.
You have 30 seconds to respond to that, if you would like to.
That may be your position in Egypt. When it came to Bahrain, it's not even in the news in the first place. I've been in a situation where there have been protesters killed, there have been prisoners. You have not even reported on the news that's so close to home. And I can give you examples from the last week where the BBC would report, and even in Saudi Arabia, I have to say, there is a policy to boycott Al Jazeera in Bahrain by the government.
You have 10 seconds.
I'll say one sentence. Al Jazeera has produced a program called Shouting in the Dark about the protests in Bahrain that got 10 awards really and is viral online.
All right.
How you say we aren't covering it?
Okay, unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to you, the audience, as well. Have a very good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that engaging debate. And whilst gentlemen are getting up to grab their lunch break, all of you are doing that. Please switch on your mobiles back. At 2 o'clock, your breakout sessions will start. 6 tracks could you please be back after the second the workshops? Back here at 5:30 as soon as possible, because we're going to have the speech of the German Minister for Economic Cooperation here just after 5:30. Until then, have great debates and bon appetit.